Good morning and welcome to Ark and Dove Presbyterian Church in Odenton, Maryland. I'm Michelle Schoonmaker, your host for The Lobby, the weekly program on the life and ministry of the church. Today is the fourth Sunday after Pentecost. Later on the program, I will be talking with Sonia Prescott of the Presbyterian Historical Society about their mission, plus a few historical figures from our denomination. But first, here's what's going on in the coming weeks at Ark and Dove. In case you didn't see, our Black Lives Matter and Gleam banners have been vandalized for the fourth time. We are now accepting a special offering to fund security cameras to try to catch and prevent more vandalism. Check out the archive, our webpage, and our social media to see how to donate. Generous neighbors have already started to chip in as a show of their support of our efforts and their disgust towards these actions. The Cat Food Pantry is going strong at its new location at First Evangelical on the corner of Piney Orchard Parkway and Odenton Road. They have a call out for tuna fish, canned chicken, and jelly. Please bring your donations to church. The collection area is across from the coat racks right by the restrooms. You may also bring donations to the pantry directly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hours are listed in the archive. The Gleam Family and Ally Support Group will meet tomorrow, July 11th at 7 p.m. Contact Amy Tardif by email at lilacandspruce@gmail.com for the Zoom link. Vacation Bible School is right around the corner. Please make sure your children are registered, your youth are signed up to volunteer, and you have reached out to Sarah Fox to let her know how you can help. The dates are July 18th through 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. each night. The nursery is open, run by caregiver Kara Moody. Kara welcomes all little ones during the 9 and 10:30 services and would like to have an older youth as a helper. This counts towards service hours. Please sign up at the link below. Our anti-racism team is challenging us all to read a book by a Black author or watch a documentary this summer. We're all aware of the vast divisions we face today, but are we aware that every one of the problems that divide us has roots in slavery and white supremacy? We hope that continuing to educate ourselves will help us along a path toward anti-racism. Book and documentary suggestions are in the archive. As we celebrated the birth of America last weekend, many of us reflected on the complicated history of this nation. This is mirrored by a complicated history of the Presbyterian Church. As we know, Presbyterians were signers of the Declaration of Independence, and many aspects of Presbyterian governance were worked into our nation's laws and policies. So today we are talking about history, specifically Presbyterian history. I am honored to welcome Sonia Prescott, a public services associate with the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I was asked to give a little bit of a short intro about the Presbyterian Historical Society. So I'll just say that the Presbyterian Historical Society is the oldest continuously running denominational historical society. We are also one of the largest. Our full holdings span an entire city block. Our official mission is we are in charge of collecting, preserving, and sharing the story of the American Presbyterian experience. That's our central mission.
Wow. Honestly, that seems so broad. So can you give us some examples of what falls under that would actually fulfill that mission?
As the official denominational archive, we hold records from every level of the entire denomination, just kind of any Presbyterian congregations across the world. And the records that we hold are session records, trustees minutes, all kinds of things that are created by congregations.
Have you seen an uptick in activity of people within the church or outside of it researching their family trees?
You know, one of the interesting things about my job that I really enjoy is the amount of genealogy research that we help folks with. And I would say I haven't noticed an uptick, but only because it's a huge part of what we do in general. So it's just always been there. The nice thing about Ancestry.com and 23andMe, but definitely Ancestry.com, is that it makes some of our records even more accessible to the public. So a number of our congregation records have actually been digitized by Ancestry.com and are available and fully searchable.
I hope that people kind of take that and start doing a little research now through those websites if they are not able to speak to either the Presbyterian Historical Society or, again, come out to visit. So one of the things about Ark and Dove is we named a room in our building after the Presbyterian pastor, John Witherspoon. Could you please give us a basic biography on him and, explain why he's considered a prominent Presbyterian?
John Witherspoon was a Scottish American Presbyterian minister who sailed from Scotland to America in 1768 to become president of what was then a small, struggling college that would eventually become Princeton University. He was one of 12 Presbyterians to sign the Declaration of Independence. He was the only active clergyman. And these are some of the reasons why he's considered a prominent figure in Presbyterian history.
So he signed the Declaration, I guess considering him a founding father, that he was also an educator. And it looks like he taught about moral philosophy from some of the research we've seen. Yet he also owned slaves and was against the abolition of slavery as an institution. How did he justify that dichotomy?
That was an interesting question to consider. I mean, and it's one that we've started to think about even when we talk about him. And I mean, we have a statue of him in front of the building. And so it's something that we've had to consider. And, you know, what's interesting when you look at John Witherspoon is that distinction between someone who did great things versus someone who necessarily was a great person, right? John Witherspoon, from looking back on his own words and his own writings, was a supporter of slavery, had no moral qualms with supporting slavery, and in fact, there were points where he said that where he made it clear that he was a proponent of it and would not support abolition of slavery. And in fact, he never, unlike some others, he never decided to free or put manumission into his will. So the people that were enslaved by him and by his family continued to be enslaved even after he passed on. And so I think that for him, honestly, I think his justification of what he did was that I think he saw African Americans as less deserving of freedom than others. And, you know, I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of institutions, including Princeton, have started to reconsider his legacy and his, you know, how we view him.
Wow. Always complicated, as we were saying earlier.
You know, one of the things that I just wanted to mention about John Witherspoon specifically is occasionally when we look back at figures like this, folks try to absolve people by saying that they were a man of their times. Oh, well, this was the common practice. So, you know, and there's kind of some moral absolution there. And what I want to make clear is that in 1787, the main ruling body of the Presbyterian Church in America drew national and international attention when it recommended that members of the church do everything in their power to promote the abolition of slavery and the instruction of Negroes, whether bond or free. And so this is what people were saying and thinking in his time. And so, you know, there's no justification of like absolving him and saying, oh, this is just what people were doing then. No, there were people who knew better and who were within the Presbyterian Church who spoke out against slavery.
Wow. Thank you so much for making that point, and sharing that additional layer of history, because you're right that we are very quick to dismiss the past in this way, but not looking at the full history of the past in those times. So understanding that he was basically at odds with the larger body is really important. Kind of disheartening, but I am really glad that we can give more of that context to our viewers. So another prominent historical figure in our denomination is John Gloucester. Can you give us a little bit of his background?
Sure. So he was the first African-American ordained Presbyterian minister in the United States and the founder of First African Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. First African Presbyterian Church was the oldest African-American, or is the oldest African-American Presbyterian church in the United States. John Gloucester was born into slavery in 1776, but was purchased and freed in 1806 by the Reverend Gideon Blackburn. Reverend Blackburn noticed that John Gloucester had this aptitude and this love for preaching, and was himself involved in converting a number of enslaved persons to Christianity. And so Reverend Gideon Blackburn saw this and decided that he was going to purchase him and free him, and then try to help him to become ordained, which eventually happened. Reverend Blackburn taught him theology, And then his theological education continued when he attended a school in Tennessee. And eventually he was given a license to preach among African Americans by the Union Synod of Tennessee. By 1807, he was preaching in Philadelphia at the First African Presbyterian Church, which he helped to found. And he was preaching to a congregation of 123 people at that time. And he was eventually ordained in 1810 and would continue to minister to folks at First African PC until his death in 1822. So of note about his life and about his kind of historical significance, from 1815 to 1822, he was the mentor of Samuel Cornish, an early African-American Presbyterian minister who organized the first congregation of Black Presbyterians in New York. Of his 5 children, 4 would go on to become Presbyterian ministers themselves, and 3 formed their own congregations. So from this one man, we have all of these great Presbyterian connections that developed within Philadelphia, within New York. So he was kind of the start of a lot of these Black Presbyterian communities in Philadelphia and New York.
So it sounds like, for what you were saying, that his church is still in existence in Philadelphia.
Due to a decline in membership, First African Presbyterian Church did decide to merge with 3 other churches to form what is now called New River Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. It is still recognized as one of the great historic churches, congregations of Philadelphia. And so that's why they decided that they wanted to merge with these other congregations to keep it going and keep the history and the story alive of First African PC. And we still have a number of records, even artifacts from those original founding days of First African PC that are within our holdings at the Presbyterian Historical Society.
So I know you mentioned they have their own great history. Is there any additional historical information about this particular church that you would like to share?
One of the things I would say about First African PC specifically was just that because it is the oldest, founded in 1807 in Philadelphia. It was for a very long time considered to be kind of the place to go to church if you were kind of an up and coming African-American middle class, upper middle class. And so that's one of the really nice things is that if you look at the evolution of the Black middle class in Philadelphia, there are a number of people who were famous figures who attended First African PC. And what I always really liked about the church as well is that despite having a congregation that was always working on being up and coming, they were always focused on giving back as they move forward. So they had a number of outreach services. They did a number of different things. The entire history of the church has always been about service to the larger community. And that's, something that I think is really beautiful that's continued on even to this day.
That community piece is so important that it sounds like they are really not just invested in how they are a part of their community, but really doing things that work and integrate with their community. So it's not just, oh, we're here and you can come by if you want to, but that they are in a lot of those spaces, that they're building those relationships, that people are coming to them as well as them going out into the wider world around them. And it sounds like that even though they have merged, that continues with these 3 congregations coming together to continue being strong community members and examples within the faith. So my mind is just reeling with information, and I feel like I need to make a visit to this historical society.
We have kind of a massive collection of records, but that we are always continuing to grow. And 2 parts of that is the African American Leaders and Congregations Collecting Initiative, which is essentially an initiative that we developed once we reviewed our collections and our holdings and said, you know what, there just isn't enough representation of the Black Presbyterian experience within our holdings. And so we're going to make a concerted effort to put staff and resources behind bringing in more of those records and telling more of that story. And so that's something that we're focused on right now. We also have the Pam Byers Memorial Collection, which is dedicated to documenting all sides and perspectives on the 40-year movement for gay ordination and LGBTQ marriage rights within the church. And so those 2 parts of our holdings are continuing to develop, and we're always welcoming in more records related to the Black Presbyterian experience, as well as the LGBTQIA+ Presbyterian experience as well. And that's just a part of us continuing to look to the past, but also look to the future.
That is amazing work. Like I said, this is an initiative we're working on right now, but have there already been conversations about what that next level might be with other maybe marginalized groups or other underrepresented groups within the current information?
Well, I think that that's something that we're always trying to be mindful of. But I think a big part of that is feedback from our patrons, from our community, because, for example, I had a conversation with a person who was calling to find information about a Korean American Presbyterian congregation. And she said, my church has been in existence for 100 years. And we're calling to find out what records you may have, because we're getting ready to do an anniversary celebration. And, I was sad to say that we didn't have any records of that particular congregation. But what I said was, I know you all are working together to put together this anniversary celebration. Can you please send us anything that you have from that celebration? And if you would like to potentially talk to congregation members or other folks who know the history of the church and would like to do maybe an oral history, let us know, and we'd be happy to help with that as well. And so that's kind of the thing that we're trying to do, of just being mindful of the gaps that we have, but also trying to make sure we continue to build this connection with our congregation members, who are the backbone of the historical society. I mean, the congregations know more than we do what might not be there, and they are the ones who can kind of alert us and keep us in the loop.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for coming on the lobby and giving us so much information about our forebears and about the Presbyterian Historical Society. Thanks to everyone for tuning in with us today. I hope you all have a great week and get out to vote. The live stream begins right now.